then I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have participants all across the world, and we have been like having this hosting this TRIZ talks since a while now. And today marks number that is the 30th chapter which we are going to conduct. We are really fortunate to have many TRIZ experts, TRIZ masters as well, to share their insights, their experiences on this TRIZ talks. Again, today we are very excited to welcome another expert, Matri's official certified level 1 professional, and who have a very extensive experience practicing as well as teaching creativity and innovation. So Professor Arvind will share his knowledge, and afterward we'll have a question and answer session. But nevertheless, if someone feels that there are a few questions, they may pitch in, and I'm sure Professor Arvind won't mind it. Am I
Not at
right?
all. Not at all. That's going
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as we have this on YouTube later, so we are recording this session with the kind permission of Professor Arvind. And now, without
Yes,
taking
indeed.
much time, I would just request Professor Arvind to take over and start the session.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. Let
Over
me
to
get
you.
started. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Uh, all right. So let me, without further ado, go to my talk and go to my slides. What I'm going to do is to talk very briefly about myself so you know who is talking to you. And then
Right.
I will talk about how I encountered TRIZ, how I teach it. And in doing so, I will talk about the way I understand TRIZ. What are the central concepts of TRIZ? How are they presentable and understandable from a very beginner's point of view? I will establish a workflow to use the TRIZ tools, and I will present a couple of case studies where we go through the entire workflow. Then I will talk about the level 1 TRIZ training program that I underwent in February and what I have got from it and how I plan to take it forward. And hopefully I will leave you with a motivation to take up TRIZ training yourself. All right, so something of myself. I have a master's from IIT Roorkee, which is in North India. My past life included working at the Indian Space Organization, ISRO, and then the Center for Development of Telematics. That was in the government R&D sector. I then worked with private companies like the Wipro Technologies, Texas Instruments, where I did fundamentally algorithm design, hardware design, chip design. And then I wanted to work in education, so I went off and worked in the not-for-profit sector, organized philanthropy, if you will, where I built libraries for government school children in Bangalore urban district. And then for a while, I was co-founder at a startup that was incubated in the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. At present, I am in higher education. I am an external faculty at the Srishti Manipal Institute of Art and Design since 2014. And I'm also adjunct professor at the Dayanand Sagar School of Commerce and Management since 22. And this is how I look like, right? So, all right. So how did I encounter TRIZ? At Srishti, I teach a course called Play and Invent, which happens to be on this website right behind us. And this Play and Invent course was about systematic creativity, how to solve problems, how does one become a problem solver, what techniques one uses, what are one's biases, what are one's methods. It was based around the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the man who invented the word flow, the ideas of cultural capital from Pierre Bourdieu, and of course the lateral thinking methods of Edward de Bono. I also had embedded certain decent socio-cultural ideas from David Foster Wallace because our creativity is embedded in such ideas. And I also brought in divergent and convergent thinking techniques based on Guilford and Wallace Kogan and some techniques for problem analysis. But it was ultimately disappointing for me because I was dissatisfied because what I felt I was teaching was really brainstorming. And brainstorming, in my mind, metaphorically, is like searching around in a 4-pi steradian volume and not in a directed way. And I felt that my own experience of hardware design and solving problems in ISRO, CDOT, and where I had worked, they had more structure. And I wanted to bring that structure into this course. I just didn't know how. In 2017, by the grace of God, I stumbled upon classical TRIZ. And now I will get into TRIZ itself and talk about how I got into that. So how did I get into it? At first, I did not believe it. It seemed magical. It seemed uncanny that somebody had a solution in, say, agriculture, and they could use it in automobile engineering. It seemed absolutely nonsensical. And I kept reading and reading and writing and writing. I read Stan Kaplan's Introduction to TRIZ, which is a nice little booklet. Then I encountered Jack Hippel's textbook from Springer, which is called The Ideal Result, and I read through that. And I also read this book, which is an illustrated version of what is called the 40 Principles, which we will see. I started writing my own content in 2018, about a year later. My disbelief was definitely for a year. And I started teaching it in small bits and pieces to art and design undergraduates in the Street School of Design. And I realized that no content survives first contact with the enemy, with the students. And therefore, my content has gone through more than 100 GitHub pushes where I have refined and refined and refined. Now it looks kind of okay. And that's where I will talk about now. So, what is TRIZ? TRIZ was invented by this wonderful gentleman called Genrich Altschuler, who was working as a patent inspector in the Soviet Navy. I believe he was posted in Baku in Azerbaijan. And TRIZ is a creative problem solving system. It's an ecosystem of tools and practices. It is based, at least in the starting point, based on design patterns gleaned from patents. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And these patents come from diverse domains within what Altshuler saw in the Soviet Navy. And today it's a growing world of experts and practitioners. And of course, TRIZ stands for this complex Russian expansion Teoria Решения изобретательских задач, which is Russian for the theory of inventive problem solving. Russians have a nice way of naming things, as we'll see. So what motivated TRIZ? So TRIZ, Altshuler was a patent inspector. He seems to have data mined, literally. All the patent applications came to him and he observed them apocryphally, or we can say he seems to have data mined about 25,000 of them, which is mind-boggling, but there it is. And he found, one of the insights he found is that the majority of the inventive patents, patents that in his mind enshrined absolute inventions at some level, they resolved something called contradictions, which is, of course, a TRIZ keyword, which we will see in more. But more importantly, he found that across domains, be it, say, scuba diving or engine control or firing control or even armament or what are the diverse things that goes on in a navy, he found that similar contradictions occurred in widely disparate domains. And we said, how can this be true? That the same kind of contradictions show up in different disguises, so to speak, across domains. And the only difference he found was that they use different terminology. The gunnery officer or the patent for armament or firing had a certain way of expressing their problem, and the person who did hydraulics and scuba diving did a different way of. But the problem in Altshuler's mind was the same once it came up in a certain way in his mind. And the third thing he found was that this, because the problems were similar, the solutions were also similar. This graph on the right shows, the kind of inventive problems he might have seen. The lowest red bar corresponds to patents which Altshuler might have okayed, which have a very straightforward application of a principle that is available within the domain. It's directly there. The uppermost two bars, the 1% blue bar corresponds to new science, where somebody invents the laser for the first time and it never existed before. They invent the Meissner effect or they figure out the Meissner effect. That's invention. The 4% green bar corresponds to new technology. Somebody invents the LED for the first time or radar for the first time, right? Those are extremely rare, kind of one in a million kind of thing. But the light yellow bar and the orange bar correspond to, in Altshuler's vocabulary, patents that embody contradictions, that there is some kind of trade-off, some kind of pitting one against the other kind of thing. And his focus and our focus will be on these two bars. And these are obviously the largest bars in the thing, and they correspond to about 60% of the patents that he was able, that's what Altshuler found. So what are the worldviews in classical TRIZ? I'm saying classical TRIZ because our training was in Gen TRIZ, which is an advanced version of TRIZ. And my initial steeping and learning was in classical TRIZ. And I'm going to talk about classical TRIZ and then gradually go into Gen TRIZ a little later. So classical TRIZ embodies a set of worldviews, a set of ideas that are central to thinking and working in TRIZ. So we will just go with that. As and when I introduce the ideas which are worldviews, I will also mention how things unfold in my class. And if there are any educators out here, I hope they will smile with me when. So the first worldview is that of the inventive problem. What is a problem? how does one look at a situation or an object for that matter and decide what is a problem? So if you look at this pizza box, what can be wrong with it unless it's empty, of course. If you're hungry, you need the pizza, and if it's empty, then it's a problem. But the problem really is that the lid gets soggy with the steam. The pizza is hot, it gives off water vapor and steam that condenses on the lid, and the lid becomes soggy because it's made of cardboard, and the lid collapses gently and actually makes contact with the topping. So you need the box for keeping the pizza hot and for transportation, but it tends to ruin the topping, right? So the problem seems to be that you have to scrape off the topping from the underside of the lid, and that's a pain, right? And just on a comment, since we talked of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he talks of maintaining what is called a surprise journal. When you are consistently surprised at something, that indicated there could be a problem which you want to work on. So this is one way of looking at a problem. Another problematic object, if you like, this is also in class. I bring these things into class. So it's a bicycle chain. If you're a cyclist, you're an avid cyclist, you know that the chain needs to be flexible so it can go around the sprockets, but it also needs to be hard because you are leaning your weight on the pedals and it needs to be able to pull the bike forward. And if the chain by some chance, mischance, gets removed or unstuck from the sprocket, you have God's own time trying to fix the thing back. You have greasy hands and thing gets jammed and so on. So this chain needs to be flexible and needs to be hard at the same time. So it seems to embody some kind of weird property that seems counterintuitive to us. And that's how we start looking at problems in TRIZ. So the summary of this worldview is that a good contradiction needs to be hard and soft, or is not half the problem, it is the inventive problem. So according to Altshuler's classical TRIZ definition, a problem is one that embodies some kind of contradiction. And I will explain clearly how to derive a contradiction. But one thing I want to say is that contradiction can exist in objects or they can exist in situations. And pretty much the construct of the contradictions is similar. And which is why G.K. Chesterton said that the riddles of God are more satisfying solutions of man. So a contradiction, once you find it, it's very thrilling to know that the thing is in front of us, we know what the problem is, and we can proceed. Another worldview is that TRIZ needs a metaphoric language. Why is that needed, and why did Altshuler make that? The big idea, according to Altshuler, is that your problem is not specific to you. It's been solved somewhere else. So if you have a problem in, say, agriculture or horticulture, maybe it's been done already in automobile engineering or maybe even jewelry, for exact matter, right? So your problem has been solved somewhere else, and you just don't know it because it's been expressed in a language which you don't understand. If you are an agriculture or a horticulture or gardener for that matter, you will not know the language spoken in jewelry circles, but the problem is the same. So really, he thought, can there be a common crossover language? Can a plumber talk to a heart surgeon? Apparently, there is a conference where plumbers and heart surgeons sit together, because if you can imagine a little bit, there is a bit of plumbing in all of us, right? So Altshuler went off and invented a metaphoric language. That language is alive and well today, and it has only 48 words, and they are metaphoric words. And these 48 words are used to describe a problem in the format of the contradiction. And he also, based on his data mining of the patents, he found 40 principles, which are also metaphors, which provide solutions to any particular contradiction, right? So in class, I first introduced the idea of the metaphor itself. It's very hard for people to take a very scientific sounding phrase, which is what TRIZ contains, and match it to their question when they're trying to make a film, or they have an HR problem, or they have a business problem, or they're trying to saw wood and so on. So this is a quotation, why is the raven like a writing desk? It's from Alice in Wonderland, and you can see that picture of the Mad Tea Party. This is the Hatter asking Alice, why is a raven like a writing desk? It's a very interesting title for the activity. So I bring in old ancient objects from my home to class. In teaching, that's the only place where you take steal from home to bring to office is when you teach. Everywhere else, you steal from office and take it home. I'm exaggerating, of course, but teaching is one place where you definitely steal things from home and carry it into your class. So I have an old slide rule, a pair of slide rules. I have a 80-year-old brass grinder and so on. And the idea is to read about metaphors, Lakoff and Johnson comes to view, and see how you can convert that object or imagine that object as something else. And if you look at the word metaphor, it means to carry something, meta and foreign. So you carry something, and what you carry is an attribute, smoothness or roughness or texture or weight or shininess and so on. And all these attributes are really what are embedded in many of the TRIZ metaphors that I just talked about. And this link here is a nice link, if you can explore it later. It's about how to explain cardiac conditions using the layman's language of an old house. And it's a pretty interesting blog. The other worldview is that of resources. The TRIZ idea of resources is extremely profound, and it shocks people when you say, I consider this to be a resource. Let me take an example that may put people off: sweat or poop or even hair. These are resources in a certain kind of problem, and not to mention gravity and temperature and pressure and air and so on. So we really need to look at a very comprehensive set of resources. Most of us tend to, as my experience has been with the students I teach, we actually think inside the box. We think much smaller than we do, right? And one good way that I find able to teach the available resources is to use a very Six Sigma tool called the Ishikawa fishbone diagram, whose diagram is out here. And it classifies all the things available in a given situation or an object on 5 parameters: man, material, method, management, and machinery. And this is primarily used, of course, to do what is called a root cause analysis. You already have a problem and you're trying to find the cause for the problem. And that's how the effect is the problem, and you're actually working backwards from there. But it also conveniently lists all the resources. This has been a good way to find out what resources are available. Uh, we will use this diagram in just a minute to see how we can make problem statements out of these available resources. Very just short while. How do I make the idea of resources come into the classroom? We play games based on Carl Dunker's cognitive games. We can talk more about it in the question time, but one of the games is about lighting a candle and mounting it on the wall and using a thumbtack. And most people try to deposit wax on the wall and try to mount it and or break the candle, but they forget that the matchbox itself is a resource, which they lit the candle, and they tend to be fixated about the function of an object. A matchbox is meant to light the candle and not usable for anything else. Most of us have this cognitive bias where we think the functionality of an object is what we know, and that's all it can be used for. A matchbox is meant to light a candle. It cannot be used to support a candle, for example, right? Another good example I use in class is from literature. Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird is a great book with a lot of children, and they solve their own problems. And this is a case where there is a squeaky gate which they have to open to enter quietly into the neighbor's yard, and they had to lubricate the hinge to make sure the gate doesn't squeak, and they all spit themselves dry. Saliva is the resource that they used, and they spat themselves dry, and they were able to open the gate and go in. I also play Ellen Dom's famous Titanic role play game by rearranging the furniture and putting students on top of the furniture near the ceiling, and then removing furniture by piece to simulate the sinking of the Titanic, and they need to figure out how to save themselves. And the idea, of course, is that the iceberg, which caused the Titanic to sink, is part of the solution. And it's a good way to look at a resource, uh, even one that caused the problem in the first place, as in the Titanic. The iceberg is actually a resource which could have been used. And there's actually a paper on that. Could Titanic have used the iceberg, right? Am I speaking too fast, Sandeep? Is
No,
my
it's
diction
okay.
okay? Okay, all right,
Yeah,
great. Another construct or worldview in TRIZ is what is called the ideal final result. This is like shooting for Saturn. You really want the impossible. It is a very Alice in Wonderland kind of thing where you state some absolutely impossible thing and you believe in it, and the way you state it, I'm sorry. The way you state it motivates a certain view of the problem, and technically you are trying to improve the ideality of the solution. You're trying to take the ratio of the benefits to the harms and costs, but really it allows you to invert the problem. It allows you to look at your problem from the side of the solution. If people could quietly please mute themselves.
I'll mute. Yeah.
Right.
You continue. You please
Right.
continue.
So it allows you to invert the problem and look at the problem from the side of the solution. And it has a very I want my cake and have it too kind of statement, and we will see how it looks like very, very shortly. How do I teach the ideal final result in class? Again, using a combination of movies. Apollo 13, if most of you have seen it, has some fantastic scenes where some seemingly impossible tasks are achieved. And if you watch this little video where uh, the astronauts are caught in the LAM of the Apollo and they're going around the moon and they're running short of oxygen. And the oxygen filters on the LAM are not the same as the oxygen filters on the other module. And therefore, the spare parts are different. And they need to make this spare part, this circular cylinder which this man is holding up, it needs to fit into the square hole made for the other part in his right hand using a whole bunch of stuff that was lying on the table. And it's a very entertaining video. And if you look at that video on the face of it, you watch it, it's great fun. It is really a test of ingenuity as to how impossible the things sound, but they managed to make that thing fit. The other story I use in class is that of the post-it note, Spencer Silver and Art Fry. Spencer Silver invented the adhesive, which he was trying to market inside 3M, but nobody seemed to be interested. He kept giving seminar after seminar. And Art Fry used that adhesive to make a bookmark for his church hymn book. And he realized that it didn't probably work very well, left a residue on the page. So he meddled with the solvents and reagents that went into the adhesive and invented one which had what is called high tack and low peel, which means it sticks very easily, but it also gets removed very easily. And he used that as a chit or a piece of paper on a file that he sent to his boss for approval. And the boss said, okay on that. And that's how the post-it was born. So Art Fry also has seeming, I mean, I position this whole first person story as something that it has to work. Spencer Silver wanted it to work, had to work, and he persuaded people. And then it can be understood from the point of view of an IFR. Uh, the other serious worldview is the idea of the contradiction. A problem, as we said earlier, in TRIZ has to embody contradictions, and contradictions can exist at multiple levels. And this is where I get into some TRIZ terminology. According to classical TRIZ, there is a plain English uh, kind of contradiction. I want this to happen, but I don't want this to get worse, or I want A to increase, but I don't want B to decrease, that kind of stuff. And we will see what A and B are. We can say that in plain English. I want to boil the milk, but I don't want to waste time watching the milk boil. I just want the milk to boil by itself, if that makes sense. And then you take this plain English contradiction and convert it into the vocabulary of TRIZ using one or other of those 48 phrases that Altshuler invented. And that's what we call a technical contradiction. And sometimes you can also derive what is called a physical contradiction, where a single physical parameter like length or breadth or width or thickness or whatever needs to be in two widely different situations at the same time. Something needs to be thick and thin at the same time. Something needs to be cold and hot at the same time, that kind of stuff. And that can also be done. Uh, I know I have potentially an international audience, but there is a famous story of Hiranyakashipu in Hindu mythology, where this monster king, he was let's say, a monster king. I know people will get offended, but he asked for a boon saying that I wish to be killed by neither man nor animal. I wish to die neither at day or night, and I can die neither inside nor outside. And he wanted to be immortal. Now, this is a contradiction. If you're not inside and outside, where can you be? If it's not day or night, when can it be? And if it's not man or animal, then who can kill you? But it turns out that Lord Vishnu solved these three contradictions and came out as a Nasimha Avtara, which is half lion, half man. He emerged or manifested himself at the twilight time when it's neither day or night. And he took this misguided king, Hiranyakashipu, to the threshold of the palace, which is neither inside nor outside, and seems to have disemboweled him out there. So that's a good way of looking at, if you're familiar with the story, that's a good way of looking at contradictions. And of course, you must also look at Alice in Wonderland, which is a great repository of these impossible sounding phrases. There is a nice little story about 6 impossible things, which is a conversation between the Red Queen and Alice. So how do we create a contradiction? We go back to the Ishikawa diagram, which I had said earlier. We have listed all the resources, methods, machinery, management, materials, and manpower. Some of these parameters here are things you can control. For example, if you're a manager, you can say, I can throw more people at it, or I can give more time, or I can increase my laboratory space, or I can bring more metal and wood stuff to make it if I'm making a physical product. Each of these items here in the Ishikawa diagram, regardless of where it lies on the diagram, can be thought of as a volume control knob. It can have a setting, a numerical setting. It's a quantity. I can make it small or big. And as we turn one knob in a direction that is suitable for a good outcome, we typically find that something becomes worse. If I throw more manpower at a problem, then my salary cost will increase, my cost will run over, and I'll need more space. So you can't do that, right? So you can either have a faster execution with more manpower, hopefully if that works, but you'll end up overrunning your cost. So there is always a push and pull between quantities that are in the Ishikawa diagram. And by playing around with these quantities, you can develop what is called the administrative plain English contradiction. And this idea came to me from a wonderful website called Open Source Triz, which is a lovely repository of TRIZTools, which you should look at. So we can manipulate the knobs within the Ishikawa diagram to arrive at one or more administrative contradictions. The more, if you can make two or three of them, then that's even more interesting, but you can probably get at least one. And then what do we do? Once we have the administrative contradiction AC in plain English, it's time for us to use Altshuler's metaphors. We have 48 of those, and we have to convert the two sides of our problem. That I want to improve this, but I don't want to worsen that, which is expressed in plain English. We want to metaphorize them into TRIZ. So we have to pick one out of the 48 for the left side, so to speak, and one out of the 48 parameters for the right side. And we have to say, I want to improve this, but not worsen that. On the other way around, I want to improve the other side, but not worsen this. And once you do that, you have a tool in TRIZ, which I will introduce immediately after, where this contradiction automatically yields or gives you two or three or four inventive principles. Remember, we said that the inventive principles Altshuler found were 40 in number. Some of those 40 immediately become available to you. And you need to consider that those are also generic solutions, those four or three solutions, and you need to bring them down back into your situation, your world, to implement what is called a specific solution. So you have a specific problem. This is where your administrative contradiction lies. You abstract it and you elevate it into the TRIZ general problem, which is where you come with the technical contradiction. The TC yields one or more TRIZ general solutions, inventive principles, as we call them. And we need to take those inventive principles and bring them back into our life situation and apply them and see, right? A quick example, if you want to do a complicated multiplication, then old-fashioned people like me will use a log table before calculators, right? So if you use log, you convert a multiplication into an addition and things become simpler, maybe, right? So in a sense, the addition of the logarithms of some numbers is like a metaphor for multiplication if your imagination stretches in that direction. Okay, so how does one look at a contradiction and actually get the solution? There is something called the TRIZ contradiction matrix, which is a 48 by 48 matrix. Let me zoom this a bit so you can see what it looks like. I hope the zoomed version is available and visible to all of you. Why don't you move? Yes, it moves. So you can see that, let me make it even bigger still. Let me show you the first, right? So it has got 48 columns, as you can see, and 48 rows, and the columns and rows are labeled the same way. There are 48 parameters. And let's look at one of the parameters, weight of a moving object, weight of a stationary object, length or angle of a moving object. These are very physical sounding, object sounding, Newtonian sounding kind of things. And this is the later version of the TRIZ matrix, which has the 49 parameters. And Darrell Mann and some of the other experts in TRIZ have even gone and extended this matrix to the 49 vocabulary and even classified the parameters based on which aspect of product design they refer to. So there, some are physical, some are performance oriented, efficiency, reliability, stability, vulnerability, safety, and manufacturing and cost, and finally on measurement. right? You can even find aesthetics out here as well. Aesthetics and appearances out here. So that also shows up out here. So what we do is we take our administrative contradiction, convert it into a pair of, I want this to improve, but I don't want that to worsen. And this act of converting from an AC to a TC is an act of making a metaphor. What do I say? My actual problem may be an HR problem. I may have a problem with some employee who is very angry and who is making life difficult. Then I want still to extract the best performance from them. And I need to metaphorize this anger and performance into one or other of these parameters out here. So for example, I can easily think of anger as temperature. If your mind works in that direction, I want to reduce the temperature, but I don't want to worsen maybe reliability and robustness. If your mind works in that direction, then this gives you a contradiction with respect to how an HR expert or HR manager would deal with that recalcitrant employee, right? So once you do that, it gives the intersection of the row and the column will give you a certain cell, which has 4 numbers typically, some have 5. And these numbers correspond to the 40 inventive principles, which are also listed conveniently on the right side. So you may get 17, and the answer is another dimension. What another dimension means to you depends on you and on your problem, which means you have to unmetaphorize that solution called another dimension. What it means in your problem is up to you and to decide that. But that solution is something that works in a problem that is specifiable as the contradiction you have just picked. This may sound a little up in the air a little bit, but once I go into the case studies, we will see exactly how this works. And I hope you will be as delighted as I was when I discovered that. Oops, sorry, my mistake. I'm going too fast here. 1 minute, please. Sorry. Where am I? Okay, bang, 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 bang. Yeah, here am I. Okay, so how do I teach contradictions and inventive principles in class? The movies are a great place. I use Home Alone. Many of you may have seen it, the Christmas movie, the very first one. It's a situation where a young boy gets left behind when his family goes off for Christmas and he's alone, and a bunch of robbers come to burgle the house and he wants to be safe. And this movie is full of uh, you can use it to develop the IFR, the contradiction, and the inventive principles. Everything shows up there in many different ways based on what the child does to protect himself against the robbers. Another good movie to use is Castaway, starring Tom Hanks. This also has many metaphoric ways in which objects are transformed based on certain attributes they possess. They are thick or thin or smooth or flat. They are repurposed metaphorically, so to speak, based on these attributes and made to serve an entirely different function, which is part of what the way the metaphoric idea of TRIZ principles and TRIZ parameters work. So this is a great fun exercise to do in class. All right, pretty much we have covered the world views. I'm going to synthesize all of this into a procedure, which I will show in a couple of case studies. And let's see how that works. So the first case study I would like to talk about is based in transportation and wildlife conservation, if you will take it. In the 50s, they built a highway in Canada through a wonderful natural park called the Banff National Park. And as the highway began to get more and more use and became arterial, road kills began to happen. So they had to do something to prevent the road kill. People were getting hurt because the vehicles would hit a bear or grizzly, and of course the grizzly was dying, all kinds of things, right? So if you look at this from a TRIZ point of view, the first thing we need to do is to make the Ishikawa diagram, which is to our right here. Uh, the knobs which we can control is the speed at which we drive, high or low. The size of the animals, we can't control that, but at least we know that there are some big animals and there are some small animals. We can also sense whether there are going to be a large number of animals in a herd that they cross the thing or they cross individually. And the time of the migration, do they migrate in the day or the night? So these are knobs that you have. The output is, of course, roadkill, and it affects animal migration and has human costs. And you also want fast journeys. These are the kind of outputs and problems that you have. If you were to state an administrative contradiction, you would say perhaps that we want to drive at high speed, but not endanger wild animal. You don't want to kill anything, right? nor do we want to endanger our vehicles as well. And here is the very impossible sounding ideal final result. I want the animals and the humans to use the road at the same time. Now, if you were to say this upfront to somebody who is looking at it, they would think you are insane. And that is the whole beauty of the whole IFR. The IFR sounds half mad, and when I've seen different IFRs done by different students for different problems, there is a bit of madness that seems to be enshrined in those statements. But this way of looking at the problem, saying, I want them to use at the same time, really focuses attention on a certain kind of solution, right? Let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. So I have made up three contradictions here, all based on this very IFR and this very administrative contradiction. So let's see if I can make sense for that. The first contradiction, technical contradiction TC1, is I want to increase the speed of the vehicle, but I don't want to affect the duration of action by a moving object. What does that mean? Speed is obviously of the car, but then I don't want the animals to wait and wait too long. So the blue, there are two parameters here taken from the TRIZ matrix for each TC. One pertains to the human activity, the car, the other pertains to the animals, and it may not be the same every time. So speed pertains to the car. I want to increase the speed. I want fast journeys. And I don't want the animals to be affected by how fast I'm driving. I don't want them to wait or migrate only when, wait for so long or get hit. I also want to improve the volume of the moving object. Now, here I'm talking of the animals. I want large number of animals to be able to move, but not worsen loss of time for the human being. I want the animals to move as and when they are, however many they are, but I don't want the cars to be parked and waiting and lose time. You see, I'm still talking of time, and all of these contradictions look like I'm aiming at a simultaneous use of the highway both by animals and the cars. And the third contradiction is I want to improve the object affected by external factors. I will explain what that means, and the duration of action by a stationary object. Now, with respect to the cars, the animals are almost stationary. They don't run at 120 miles per hour or whatever. So I don't want to worsen the duration of time it takes for the animals to cross. If they want to cross, they should be able to cross immediately. And at the same time, I don't want to drive in a way that makes that worsen. So I want the external effects of my driving to be very low, in that I will not hit an animal, or I will not have to suddenly brake or whatever. Those are the external results of my driving. But I don't want to worsen the duration it takes for the animal to cross. Now, each of these three contradictions, 9 versus 15, 7 versus 25, and 30 versus 16, I plug them into the contradiction matrix and I find the cell, and I know what the solutions are. So let us go one by one. The first contradiction, speed versus duration of action, gives me four solutions. The first metaphoric solution is number 3, called local quality. What does that mean, local quality? Something that I do very locally. Where do I do it locally? In the forest, on the road, inside my car, on the animal? Good heavens, no, I don't. I can't change the animals. I can't really change all the cars. So I've got to do something in a very small place, in a very local place, and I don't know what it is. But it's telling me that the solution is not to make very large changes, but the changes are very localized. That's the first thing. The second solution is periodic action. I need to do the same thing over and over again. I can't do something only one time. I need to do it over and over again, either in time or in space. Again, what exactly that we will repeat is not clear here yet. 35 is a great solution from TRIZ. It's called parameter change. It's one of the most commonly used ones, but it's not apparent directly from here which parameter to change. Do I change my speed? But that's the one I don't want to worsen that. So speed cannot be it. What is the thing that I want? What other parameters do I have? And merging, from my point of view, doesn't make sense. What do I merge? I mean, there's nothing here to club together and merge. I don't know what it is. Like, it doesn't make sense at all. So at this moment, we are stuck. I mean, this technical contradiction doesn't give us too much. I'll tell you why I brought up this TC1, which doesn't give us a solution, in just a minute. Let's go on to TC2, which is 7 versus 25, volume of moving object versus loss of time. Here again, it says parameter change. And mechanical vibration, what does it mean? Do I have to honk? Do I have to make sound? Or is there a siren? Or do we have to have rumblers on the road but all that doesn't seem kind of right. And then there is this even more cryptic metaphoric solution called rejecting and regenerating parts, number 34. which also is not very evocative by way of a solution. So let's press on and go to TC3. This says object affected by external harmful factors. I don't want the effect of my driving to be harmful to the animals. But at the same time, I don't want to worsen the duration of action by the animals. And we get a beautiful solution here called another dimension. What does that mean? My road is flat. It has length and breadth. Another dimension would mean I go neither length nor breadth, but I go depth or height, which means I need to go above the road or below the road. Okay, voila, that's interesting. Segmentation again tells us that something has to be made in small pieces, and that harks back to the repetition we saw, periodic action we saw earlier. Composite materials, my solution needs to be made up of many things, maybe trees and tar and concrete and mud and a whole bunch of things, and even paint maybe. And homogeneity tells me that some entities need to have the same opportunity or need to be treated in the same way. So, what is the solution like? The solution is, of course, the bridge or the tunnel, and it includes here's the bridge out here, and you can see the bridge is made up of concrete, and there are trees, and there is mud, and it looks like a piece of forest elevated. So, from the animal's point of view, it doesn't look different from where it normally lives. The animal is barely aware that it is crossing a high-speed highway. So, and it is above, so it's got another dimension. A parameter has changed. We have changed the nature of the road, the height of the road, we have changed it. And it is local because this bridge is not a continuous bridge. It's here, and then after a few kilometers, there's another bridge. After a few kilometers, there is another tunnel, but it's hyper local. It's only for maybe some tens of meters that it is wide. And homogeneity is beautiful because with this, both the animals and the vehicles have an equal opportunity. So it's homogeneous. Another curious thing that happens when you do this kind of thing is you find that the inventive principles have a way of fusing together. I mean, the animal bridge and the tunnel is really a coalescing of 1735 and 3. Another dimension and parameter change and local quality. They all miraculously kind of fuse together and they give point vectorially at one solution which you want to use. The reality is, of course, that this works very well, but the herbivores use the bridges because they have greater visibility and they can run, and they're also broader. The carnivores apparently prefer the tunnels. So it has led to a nice little separation in space, if you like, between different species of animals. All right, here is another case study, the second of the two that I want to present, and this comes from public relations. So it's a very different thing from transportation and wildlife. In a democracy, of course, you have the right to remain silent, but you also have the right to speak, which means you have the right to protest. And if you want to go on strike and you are a bunch of bus drivers and bus conductors, uh, your work spot happens to be the bus which you're driving. And you want to go on strike against the management for maybe higher pay or better benefits or better working hours and so on, you will find that the strike actually hurts the commuters who are forced to empathize. They are there and they use the bus daily and they're saying, yeah, we understand why you strike, but look, you're killing us. So they are forced to empathize. And the strikes hurt the commuters, but they don't seem to directly affect the people against whom the strike is directed, the managers. The managers don't ride on the bus, they are very far away. So the strike is located somewhere, and the managers against whom the strike is directed are somewhere else altogether. And when the strike is over, the drivers come back, the passengers are more than a little fed up with them, and the drivers have to kind of be apologetic and so on, maybe. So, how does this solve itself? Let's look at the knobs here. We have the drivers, they participate or not. We have the commuters, they may be there or may not be there, maybe travel or not. We have the schedules, the timings, whether they're okay, not working, the time of the day, whether it's a daytime, nighttime strike. We have the fares, the routes, the tickets, the money, the change, the type of buses and seats. Now, you see, I'm talking of a strike, and the resources we are actually being aware of is the type of the bus and the seat. On the face of it, it doesn't make sense to look at it, but by ignoring this kind of resource, we do so at our own peril. It does open up a complete worldview that helps us to solve the problem better. What would be the IFR in this case? The strikers must convey their anger only to their employers who are far away. What would be the administrative contradiction? We want to strike against our employers, but they are not riding on the buses we drive. The commuters are. That's the plain English way of saying it. And if you were to then look at converting this AC into a technical contradiction, you want to improve the force of your strike, number 10, row number 10, and you don't want to worsen what we saw earlier, the object generated harmful effects. Earlier, we saw object external effects on the object. This is in the other way around, where the external effects generated by your strike do not worsen life for the commuters. So you want to improve the force of your strike. Your strike has to be solid, it has to be very forceful, but the local bad effects created by that action should not be on the commuters. And if you want to go and derive what is called a physical contradiction, which I have not really properly introduced, I don't think I'll have time to do that. You might think that you want to be striking and not striking at the same time. Now, this sounds very impossible and very weird. But if you look at from whose point of view, from the commuter's point of view, you don't want to be striking because the commuter should not be affected by the strike. The strike should affect the managers and people who are away. So, what would be the solution to this? Let's cut to the chase. I have four solutions. I have IP13, which is the other way around. What is the other way around? What is directional in this case? The bus route. The bus route cannot be changed because the passengers know where they want to go. They want to go from A to B, not B to A. So I can't turn the bus around. What else is direction? The ticket transactions. Okay, so ticket transactions mean that I pay the fare and the conductor gives me a ticket. How do I reverse that? Should the ticket be given by the passenger? That is nonsensical. So it's not clear what the other way around means. Local quality, something needs to change very visibly inside the bus. Again, we don't know what it is. IP636 is phase transition. Something viral, VIRAL, needs to happen inside the bus. A viral trend needs to spread. Everybody needs to change dramatically. But what is going to change? Is it the commuters, the driver, the staff? And there's got to be something intermediary, something that is in between the people who are striking and some other entity in the problem. We don't know what an intermediary is doing. How do we use these? These are all pointing at some solution, which we need to figure out how to demetaphorize them into our problem. So how do we do that? Well, the way you turn around a transaction is to make the travel free. The tickets are not sold. In effect, the conductor is paying the passengers to travel by not charging. That's the other way around. I've taken the transaction between passenger and conductor and flipped it around and said, this transaction is vectorially in the opposite direction. I run the bus on time. I consume fuel. I transport passengers, but there is no revenue. The revenue acts like an intermediary between the strikers and the management. Once they see that buses are running, everything is normal, but there's no money being added to the bank or the account. There's no revenue. There's no money coming in each of the bus terminuses or the collection centers. Look, there's no money. That no money, no revenue acts like an intermediary. It will directly get the attention of the management. And inside the bus, what happens when you tell, if you're a bus conductor and driver and tell the people today is free, everybody suddenly bursts into laughter and smiles. So there is a phase change within the bus. Everybody is happy all of a sudden, and it's hyper local, it's local quality. So all these solutions vectorially point to the same thing. No tickets, run the buses, and your strike is in good shape. So in summary, my class workflow is to find a problem using Bourdieu, Mihaly, Csikszentmihalyi, and David Foster Wallace. We look at resources with the Ishikawa diagram and use open source TRIZ to find the contradiction. We state the administrative contradiction. We state the final result. We convert the administrative contradiction into a technical contradiction, look up the matrix, and we unmetaphorize that into solving it. Sandeep, how much time do I have? I need to talk briefly about the GenTRIZ part. Do I have another 10, 15 minutes?
Uh, yes, try to make it a bit short so that we
Right.
can also
Okay.
accommodate
Very
more
quickly.
questions.
Okay, great. All right, so all that is fine. What about GenTRIZ? What are the core ideas? And this is where I am talking about the level 1 training that I took in February. The way I arrange it in my head is there are three sets of problems. Three sets of solutions, rather, or three sets of techniques within GenTRIZ. I call one of them the innovation opportunity finding tools, of which you have 9 windows and the most valuable parameter and the anti-product view. Then there are problem analysis tools, which are function analysis and function ranking and the cause effect chain analysis. And then the problem solving part, which has, of course, the contradictions and inventory principle, but also has something profound called trimming and the 76 scientific effects. Let me see if I can briefly give you a quick view on each of some of them, not all. So the system operator 9 windows is a 3 by 3 matrix where you look at the past, present, and future of the system which you are looking at, but also the subsystem parts. Where did it come from? What goes up to make your subsystem? And in which super system is your system embedded? So if you look at the railway system and your problem happens to be the wheels on the wagons, the subsystem are the rails and the sleepers and the what shall I say, the ballast and so on. The super system corresponds to the railway lines and the schedules and the stations and the ticketing and so on. And when you look at the past, present, and future of this kind of system, you will be able to find opportunities where there is scope for either improvement of something or change, or you'll actually find a problem, or you will be able to make the service and the system much better, right? So this is a great 9 window view of looking at a world and trying to find where you can insert a new innovation. The main parameter of value, MPV, is also a tool in Gentris, which is typically plotted as a 2 by 2 kind of matrix. You have parameters or functionalities which you want, and these can be known or unknown, and they can be satisfied or unsatisfied. So if you, for example, have a need in a product that is satisfied, but most people don't know about it, it's like a checkbox item. It is tacit. People either say, yeah, it's there, and they don't talk about it. It's a tacit kind of thing. But if you look at something that is unsatisfied and unknown, then it's either to be viewed as a limitation which people are living with for years and they've forgotten about, saying, yeah, it's never going to change, this is the way it is. Or if you are an innovator, you should say that is a potential latent parameter of value for me, and I should somehow make my product, take that. A known need, which is unsatisfied, is obviously your main parameter of value. So this table, when you sit and discuss the parts of your product, is also capable of giving you opportunities for innovation. Uh, when I go to problem identification, there's a fantastic suite of tools called component analysis, function analysis. Uh, Very quickly, I will tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a system where you're looking at the corrosion strength of different kinds of metals. And this typically needs to happen in a large vessel, which is inert, made of platinum, and you put acid in there and you drop those metal things and see how much they change in weight. And if you look at all the components in the system, there's the vessel, the ingots, and the acid, and the oven, and so on. Each of them touches or manages to make contact with each of the other objects or not. And this matrix tells you which functions exist in your system and which don't, and which are harmful and which are useful. So this is a great way of looking at where the problem could lie. If two entities are making a contact which is harmful, that's a thing which you can potentially look at solving. And there's a English syntax again to how you would express this. Uh, there is also another thing called the interaction analysis, which is similar, but again, a different way. What objects interact and influence? The interaction is where I can probably exert a pressure or a temperature on another part of the system. There is a uh, oven that heats up the acid, for example. So the oven heats the acid. You can look at that way. So what are the potential interactions that go on in the system and which are the ones that are useful and so on? This is another very cool idea that you have in Gentris. Trimming is where you look at all the existing interactions and you rank them. I won't go very deep since I'm running short of time. Different interactions between objects have a different rating based on where the objects are located. Your system could be some entity within the system could be interacting with the super system. That interaction has a certain rank, and the system could be an entity in your system could be interacting with some part in the subsystem that has another kind of ranking. And if you make this network diagram graph like thing happen, then you will know which are the interactions that are capable of being trimmed. So this is innovation not by addition, but innovation by actually removal of interactions. And of course, the intent is that the ultimate functionality needs to be unimpaired. You cannot compromise on that. So why do we learn TRIZ? I believe the gamut of the tools in TRIZ contains the distilled inventive wisdom of humanity. I know this sounds very bombastic, but if you look at the number of patents that people have distilled and put into TRIZ and the kind of tools we have, the kind of vision it promotes, we are looking at leveraging the wisdom of all the inventions that have gone before us. It's almost like being Isaac Newton. And it can confer superpowers on the user. It makes you believe in impossible things and make them happen. It also enhances your worldview. You start looking at things very differently and appreciate the value of things very, very differently. It makes you a problem solver. And maybe it makes you a thought leader at the workplace. You get a following and stuff, but you must be prepared to be called crazy and get incredulous looks. And I can attest to this from personal experience. I ran a TRIZ workshop at the Management Institute where I work. And some of the questions, it was for students, of course. And some of the questions I asked them as part of the presentation, like, is it possible to have 200% attendance in a course? And they were looking at me as if I was mad, but the question was very valid, obviously. And of course, there's money and name and fame if you want it. So that's why you should learn TRIZ. What will I add to my course? This is my last slide, I think. I need to look at the MPV technique, the anti-product view, which I didn't explain, the function analysis component. This is a very, very vital part of the analysis of the problem, and I want to do that. And of course, trimming is also another way of solving the problem. Contradictions are not the only way. Trimming is the only way, is also another way of doing it. But my contradiction is, how do I convert all these things into games in the classroom? I'm teaching art and design students. I need to gamify my experience. And I also need to figure out what to trim from the existing course content. Thank you very much for putting up with my long talk. I am now ready for questions, Sandeep.
Yeah. Thank you, Arvind. It was a wonderful presentation filled with a lot of case studies and very good explanation of each one of them. So now the forum is open for question and answers. If anyone has a question, please feel free to ask. If you are facing challenges of having not a very good connectivity or mic, you can text it. I'll ask it for you.
Yes.
Chandra, you want to ask something?
Yes, I want to ask.
Please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Arvind. It's a wonderful session, and the way you present is amazing.
Thank you so much.
It is not like come to me like 1 hour is passed quickly, so quickly. So one question come in mind when we are talking about the contradiction stuff, right?
Right.
We come up with some numbers with the contradiction matrix, but still I believe that it's in person dependent opinion which we can take up forward as an idea, which is not giving in direction. I mean to say, which is giving in. I mean to say the arrow into direction, but you need to think on their own. Is the theory behind it? Is again it's in person dependent.
There is no substitute for domain knowledge, uh, Mr. Bore. You will construct your contradictions based on who you are and what you know. So
Mhm.
this is not a push button kind of solution. The contradictions you make are based on your IFR, which is again what you want to state. For example, in the case of the wildlife crossing, I stated the IFR as I want the animals and the vehicles to use the thing at the same time. I could have stated my IFR differently altogether, that the animals will never come near the highway and the cars will never be near the animals. I could have stated my IFR that way. I would have gone off in a different direction altogether. So, yes,
Mhm.
there is a certain aspect of domain knowledge and creativity involved in imagining the direction of the solution. But once you've got the direction settled, this tells you what are the solutions possible to do that. So, it is not person independent. That I would agree with you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for.
May I add something to it?
Please, sir.
Whatever
Please
he
do.
has
Please do.
explained is correct. But while we go with TRIZ methodology, while we go to level 3 or while we go to ARIZ, TRIZ is such a strong tool wherein it does not leave anything to guess. Everything can be found only and only by the methods, and it is very structured.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
Okay.
I see a question here by Dr. Harlal Singh Mali, which says, how can I integrate design thinking with TRIZ? This is a vexed question. Let me see if I can do it. Design thinking involves several steps where you empathize with your situation, you empathize with the people having the problem, you do your primary research to find out where the problem is, and then you make iterative solutions and see which one works. This is the rough gist of the where TRIZ sits in is in reducing the number of iterations, A, and also pointing in what direction the iterations to take. The solution volume, if you can imagine it, is a 4 pi steradian volume or a sphere around your head. And you can vectorially see in any direction you want. But once you follow TRIZ, the solution volume becomes a kind of cone which ends at your eyes, and it's maybe 10 degrees or 5 degrees, and you know exactly in what direction to proceed. So your whole money and time and effort in making those iterations happen, those trial products or demo products, is really going to be cut very much short by using TRIZ. Even before you apply TRIZ, the whole idea of resources and figuring out what you have, that can be fitted into the empathy mapping part of TRIZ, where you look at the problem, you look at the people experience the problem, but you also look at resources available in a very different way. So I think there are parts of TRIZ that can be nicely bolted on to different aspects of design thinking, Dr. Harilal.
Sandeep sir.
May I add something to this?
Please do.
Basically, while we go with design thinking, we come to know the pain area, and after that, it is actually like a brainstorm. So TRIZ pitch in over there instead of brainstorming,
Exactly
there will
correct.
be a guided
Exactly
brainstorming,
correct.
and that is
Yes.
the strength of the TRIZ.
Exactly correct. Yes. So that's
And
where I came
one
from.
more
The
thing, like,
want to please
yeah,
go on.
yeah,
Please go on. Please
sorry.
go on. Yeah. Please go on,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah. One more thing, what we look at it, basically, when we say that design thinking's first point is like identifying the pain what a customer is facing, which
Right.
probably the person may not be able to realize. But if we have voice of customer, in TRIZ, we
Yes.
also have voice
Exactly.
of product.
Product.
And while we mix these two things, there will be a sweet spot between the voice of customer, voice of product. We won't be able to explain you in detail, but definitely will ensure that we can have some special training on this or special insights on this. But while a product develops, while there is an evolution of a product, every product is like evolved in a very structured way. There is a law of evolution of a
Right.
product. So looking at it, like if I just have to give a simple example, which everybody knows, but I'm just emphasizing, Steve Jobs, nobody went to Steve Jobs and told that we do not want keypad phones. We want bigger screen. That was the expectation of them. But now it is a voice of product, and it shows that the same screen can also be used as a keypad. So this is how
Right.
we look at the difference between, or we don't say that there is a difference between any of the methodology. We use all the methodology, but considering design thinking and TRIZ has inbuilt many things. If we go in a very systematic way, all the things would be taken care of automatically.
I have a
I
question
hope
from
it is,
Jay Kumar. Question from Jay
yeah.
Kumar, which says, can we expect more than 48 principles? The 48 are the parameters, not the principles. The 48 parameters are the ones that help you define your contradictions. Earlier, they were in the original TRIZ matrix invented by Altshuler, there were only 39. And Darrell Mann and some of the others looked at later patents and added it and made it to 48. So that happened in 2003. So as our problems and solutions and technologies increase, perhaps the 48 may increase, but I personally don't think this is pretty good set. Even the 40 inventive principles have stood the test of time. Only the frequency of their use has changed. So, for example, there is a inventive principle number 27, which talks of discarding and reusing parts. That was a 1960s kind of thing where you could, use and throw kind of very common. But today, with sustainability and the SDGs kicking in, that principle is not in use as much as it was earlier. And other things like asymmetry and the other way around and parameter change have come up. So the frequency of use of a given inventive principle is changing, but I don't think the actual set has changed too much. Jay Kumar? Harsha Gagan, you
Yes.
have a question,
Yes,
please?
yes. Arvind sir, first of all, in a crisp manner, let me thank you It was wonderful presentation, and with sort of a Make in India approach
Thank you so
to
much.
explain the trees concepts with the examples of our own land. Thank you for that. And I am a student of trees, particularly in particular business trees, and I will be happy to interact with you more, and how to complement your efforts by use of business trees. So it will be great if you can share your contacts. And in this session, of course, I will not stretch much because of the time limit, but I will be happy to interact with you.
My
That
pleasure,
was
sir.
wonderful.
My
Very
pleasure.
nice. Very nice.
You can find me on LinkedIn, sir, and then
Okay.
message me there.
Certainly.
That is the best way to do it.
Certainly.
I also have a question from Jagannathan about the role of the fishbone diagram in formulating the AC and TC is not very clear. Yes, I did rush through that. The fishbone diagram has resources uh, against the man, machine, material, and so on. Each of these resources is quantified as something we can deploy or not. So you can think of each resource as a knob that you can turn towards min or max. Is this good so far? Jagannathan, if you're here still. Yes. Okay, so now when you turn a knob one way or the other, you say, I want to improve the outcome, and I turn the knob towards max or min, depending on how it affects the outcome. You will find that some other knob is saying, look, if you want to do that, then you have to throw more money at it or throw more, it'll take more time or more space. So the example I gave is if you turn the knob of manpower, you want to crunch the time of the project, and you say, it's just a matter of labor. So if I, instead of having 5 people, I have 50 people, and I up the dial on the manpower, I'll end up spending more money, and also maybe I'll take up more space for the 50 people. So another knob will automatically say, I'm going to give you trouble. When you improve that, I will give you trouble there if you want to do that. That is where the Ishikawa diagram can actually create administrative contradictions in English, man versus money, manpower versus thing. And then you have to translate that using the 48 parameters into the technical contradictions. Jagannathan, I hope that is okay.
Yeah, he has texted that he has understood, and
Yes.
he's thanking for.
Annamalai says there are more case studies and examples. I have created a sort of database. I've shown you only two here, but I have written up about a dozen or so, I think, and they're on my website. If you contact me on LinkedIn, then I can send you the link to my website, and you can see the TRIZ database, as I call it, and that's out there, and you're welcome to look at it. So I think we are done with the questions.
Yeah, rest all our compliments,
Thank
which
you.
you deserve a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so of course, time is always limited, and we cannot go beyond that. There would be many questions which people would have. So, of course, one way that you can directly connect with him on his LinkedIn profile, or you can also post these questions to us at info@trizasia.com, and we will forward these questions to Professor Arvind, and definitely we'll get the answers and send
Sure.
it back to you.
Last question, Professor Sandeep.
Yeah,
Like,
go ahead. Go ahead.
is this session is recorded?
Yeah, it is recorded and available
Great,
on
great.
YouTube.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You can just on YouTube, you can search TRIZTalks and you will get it. In case you don't, ping me, I'll send it across. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
So,
Thank you, Professor Sandeep. Thank you
yeah,
for all the listeners. I
yeah.
enjoyed
Thank
presenting
you.
it to you.
It's my time to say thank you.
And
You have been,
our time too. Arvind sir, thanks a lot. Thank
yeah.
you.
Everyone else has said it, but it is my like honor and duty to say this. Thanks for sharing your time and sharing all your insights and experiences. And there is a lot of things which we all can learn from each other, and that is what the basic purpose was, wherein we started this Thrist Talks. So this was, as I mentioned, 30th chapter, and 31st chapter would be coming very soon, within 30 days, or rather less, 27 days. 27th of June 2025,
Wow.
we will be coming up with some another expert who would be sharing their experiences and insights with us. And stay tuned, we will keep on like updating who all are there. And till then, if you have any kind of query regarding how to learn TRIZ, where to learn TRIZ, what TRIZ is exactly, and in which domain it will work, or whatever the question may be, feel free to ask it on just a simple email ID info@trizasia.com. Okay. And
I would like to take an
yeah,
opportunity to thank you, Professor Sandeep, to make and take the effort to make and arranging this session every month and time and again without fail, and make us more happy to bring his expert guys over here on the session, and gain a lot of knowledge out of this session. Thanks both of you. Thanks, Professor Sandeep.
yeah, I'm honored to hear that. And this was the basic purpose. Like we want, TRIZ is not yet very very buzzword or a very familiar word in India as such, and particularly in industry, academics, it must be there. There are many universities which are teaching it, many MNCs which are practicing it, but still it has not reached to everyone. So that was a humble thing which we started with. Even we did not think that we'll go so long. But now we have decided that we'll do it. At some time, it is not possible to do it for certain reasons like Diwali, financial year end, when people are not available. So barring those, we are trying to have it every month, last Friday. And time also we have fixed up at 4 to 5. We generally do not jump it. Today we have jumped slightly. That's okay. That's okay. So on behalf of TRIZAsia and the first chapter at AISSMS College of Engineering, I am Sandeep Wankade saying thank you to all of you who have attended, because without you, it is of no use of telling all these things. And again, thank you, Professor Arvind, and looking forward to all of you to be there and participate in each one of the TRIZ talks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Arvind sir. Thank you, Sandeep sir.
Bye.
Okay, so with the permission of all, I would now end the session.
Please do.
It's
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.